The Seattle Seahawks entered 2022 with not a lot of hope and very little expectations. At least that's what everyone thought outside of the Pacific Northwest. 6 months ago, we were looking at a quarterback battle between Drew Lock, a player who showed promise in his rookie year back in 2019, but quickly flamed out, and Geno Smith, a former Jets quarterback who had been a backup for nearly a decade. He played for the Seahawks while Russell Wilson was out for a few games in 2021, but there was not a lot to look forward to heading into this season. Or so we thought. Fast forward to the present day, and the Seahawks overachieved by every definition, and Geno Smith led the NFL in completion percentage, finished 4th in passing touchdowns, and finished 8th in passing yards. For the expectations they had, this season was wildly successful for Seattle, which now puts them in a very interesting situation, because what do they do moving forward? Well, we're going to try and answer that in today's video, and without further ado, let's begin. And the first thing we are going to discuss in today's video is the quarterback situation. To me, it's pretty clear what the Seahawks should do. Geno Smith finished top 10 in several passing categories and deserves to get paid. He will, of course, one way or another, but the team that pays him should be the Seattle Seahawks. There is some risk in paying Geno Smith, and questions like, was this a one-year thing, or how will defenses play him in 2023 with a full year of tape watching Geno in Seattle, but to me, that doesn't matter. I don't think you can let him walk after the year he had, and at minimum, Geno should be franchise tagged for the upcoming season. And for Geno personally, I don't think there's a better situation you could realistically go to than going back to Seattle. You have two good receivers to throw to in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and a 1,000-yard running back in Kenneth Walker. The Seahawks finished top 10 in points per game in 2022, finished with a winning record, and granted this applies to every team, not just Seattle, but they lost a couple of very winnable games. I don't really fault Seattle for losing to San Francisco in the playoffs, as they are a very good team, but that is something we are going to discuss in today's video, and is applicable as to why the Seahawks are in a very interesting situation. For non-Seahawks supporters or non-believers, you can say the Seahawks should move on from Geno and essentially point to not one, not two, but 3 losses to the 49ers in 2022, and basically say, do we really think Geno can beat the 49ers, or given they lost by double digits to the Chiefs on the road as well, any great team when it matters? You can also look at the team's record against playoff teams in 2022, which was 2-5 by the way, and say, well, this team isn't that close to competing for a Super Bowl either. Not to say I believe these things as much as I am pointing them out. And for what it's worth, I do think Geno should be paid. The controversial part is how much and for how many years, because at the end of the day, the Seahawks have to protect themselves in case Geno does not play at the level he did in 2022. There are plenty of other things to discuss with the Seahawks this offseason and why they are in an interesting situation, and them quietly having the number 5 overall pick is certainly a point of discussion. Head coach Pete Carroll said they have to get better up front defensively, and they have to get more production, and in particular, they need major help. If you watched the Cardinals video recently, then you know 2 of the top prospects in the draft are Jalen Carter from Georgia and Will Anderson from Alabama. Seattle's head coach is acknowledging how much help they need up front, and I don't think they would trade up to get one of these guys, and in this scenario in particular, it would presumably be with the division rival Cardinals at number 3, but I do think the Seahawks could get Tyree Wilson, an edge rusher from Texas Tech. Tyree is 6'6", 275, and is a freak athletically. But there's also a player the Seahawks could go after in free agency that would solve a lot of these problems, and that's Commanders defensive lineman Daron Payne. Payne is, in fact, a pain to opposing offensive lines and finished the 2022 season with 11.5 sacks, and at 320 pounds, he is a force in the middle of the defense. No offensive lineman wakes up on Sunday morning with a sigh of relief that they get to play Daron Payne. He forces teams to double team him, and he makes a ton of sense for Seattle to go after in free agency. Daron will be just 26 years old at the start of the 2023 regular season, and for a team that gave up the 3rd most rushing yards in the NFL in 2022, This is a hell of a start to getting the defense back on track. Opposing offenses ran the ball 525 times against the Seahawks in 2022, which was the third most of any team in the NFL behind only, you guessed it, the Bears and Texans, who finished with the first and second overall draft picks. Teams would rather run up the gut than test a corner like Tariq Woolen time after time after time, and it showed. So get better in the trenches and sign Daron Payne, who in turn will not only help the run defense, but help the pass rush too. It cannot be emphasized enough that at 320 pounds, Daron had double-digit sacks this past year, and this would be a huge addition for the Seahawks, who are already building a good secondary. Payne's presence alone would also impact the defensive line because his teammates, like Uchenna Nwosu, who quietly finished the year with 9.5 sacks, would get more one-on-one opportunities. The offensive line simply cannot double-team everyone, and the Seahawks could still draft a player like Tyree Wilson at number 5 overall. A lot of the Seahawks' 2023 offseason will revolve around getting the defense better, and specifically the run defense, and adding the big fella from Washington would be one hell of a start. While Pete Carroll did emphasize the defensive line needing to get better, and while we did explore the possibility of them acquiring Daron Payne, I also want to acknowledge the possibility of them trading back to Carolina at 9 if one of the 3 quarterbacks is still there. Because Denver played so bad this year, there is a good chance Seattle can flip this top 5 pick into another first-round pick next year. The Seahawks have 3 picks in the top 40, as they also have Denver's second-round pick, which is number 37 overall. So Seattle is not locked into taking a defensive lineman at number 5. In fact, I like the possibility of them trading down, acquiring another pick next year, and taking a corner like Christian Gonzalez from Oregon. Gonzalez is a 6'2" corner who did not play college football too far from Seattle and fits the molds of the corners Seattle likes. Keep in mind the Seahawks still have their own first-round pick, which is number 20 overall. So the possibilities of what they could do with their first-round picks is truly endless. I do, however, think the best case scenario for them is to sign Daron Payne in free agency, trade back and acquire what would presumably be another first-round pick, and have a corner duo of Tariq Woolen and Christian Gonzalez for the next 5 years. This, in turn, would help the pass rush because of the good corner play. And football is obviously a team game, and this is how the defense would work together. There is also another defensive tackle Seattle could acquire to help their run defense, and that's Siaki Ika from Baylor. Ika is a mountain of a man, and because of his size, this is not an exaggeration here, 6'4", 360 pounds, he inevitably draws comparisons to Vita Vea, and Ika is what you think he is as a player, a stout run defender that would help the middle of any defensive line. So pretty quickly, if the Seahawks have a draft where they acquire Christian Gonzalez, Siaki Ika, and Daron Payne in free agency, all of which is possible, the Seahawks are a much more formidable opponent. And earlier in the video, it was mentioned they lost a couple of close games they should not have, and that we can do this scenario with every team, not just Seattle, but there's 3 in particular I want to highlight. The Falcons' loss in Week 3 was a 27-23 loss in which Cordero Patterson ran for over 140 yards, and the Falcons ran for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns on the day. I like what Atlanta is doing with their run game and think they have some pieces for their future, like Tyler Algier, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts, but the 2022 Falcons, led by Marcus Mariota, had no business going into Seattle, putting up 27 points and winning this game. Atlanta also lost the turnover battle, yet came out victorious. And unfortunately for Seattle, this was not the only bad team to go into their stadium and beat them down with the run game. The rushing champion Josh Jacobs had the best game of his career against Seattle, as he was on his way to a 229-yard, 2-touchdown performance, including an 86-yard walk-off touchdown in overtime. Yes, this game went to overtime, but the Raiders ran the ball 40 times for over 280 yards in this game, which translates to over 7 yards per carry. And the other notable loss Seattle had in 2022 was at home against the Panthers. Carolina held the ball for 39 minutes in this game, ran for over 220 yards, and put up 30 points in Seattle. Quarterback Sam Darnold only threw for 120 yards, yet flew home to Charlotte with a win. And the common theme here, well, two common themes, is they all ran the shit out of the ball against the Seahawks, and the other is they all finished with top 10 draft picks. And forget an elite run defense. If the Seahawks had even a league average run defense, I am confident this team wins these 3 games, and the 9-8 Seahawks finish the year 12-5, and the outlook of this team is entirely different than how we view them at the moment. The Seahawks are in a great position to not only compete for the division in 2023, but seriously compete if they play their cards right. With contending teams, you always hear about the windows they have while quarterbacks are on their rookie deal, and the Eagles and Bengals perfectly represent that, as both Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow will soon be getting paid over $40 million per year, maybe even more. The Seahawks will have to pay Geno Smith this offseason, but how this correlates to Seattle is they have key players at other positions making pennies on the dollar relative to their production. Kenneth Walker is a very good back, and if he stays healthy in 2023, I can't imagine him not having 1,000 rushing yards for the second consecutive season. Corner Tariq Woolen led the league, or tied for leading the league in interceptions with 6, and the Seahawks had 2 good starters at offensive tackle this year in Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas. So while the Seahawks may not have a quarterback making $4 or $5 million per year, and even less in Jalen Hurts' case, cumulatively they benefit from the rookie scale contracts in a big way. Their 2022 draft class was a slam dunk of slam dunks, and in theory should only progress in 2023. I don't think people realize how close this team is to competing for NFC championship games. Sure, you can say they have a lot to do to catch up to the 49ers, which is true, as getting beat by a team 3 times in 1 year shows exactly that, but when you map out their offseason, Seattle's that is, they can make significant strides and be right there amongst other NFC teams. The Los Angeles Rams will be back next year after a year riddled with injuries, but I do think a healthy Seahawks team would beat a healthy Rams team in 2023 if the Seahawks make the right offseason moves. Seattle gave up the 25th most points in the NFL in 2022 and gave up 30 or more points 5 times. Not surprisingly, when you give up that many points, your record in those games is not going to be very good, and it wasn't, as they were 1-4 in games they gave up 30 plus points. They gave up 30 or more to the aforementioned Raiders, Panthers, and another team that may surprise you because of how bad they were in 2022, the Saints. New Orleans also ran for over 230 yards against this team, and hell, you can even throw that game into the ones we were discussing earlier. And if I'm John Schneider, the GM of the Seahawks, I am calling Daron Payne's agent and asking one question, and it's simple. How much does he want? Because I'm not getting off the phone till we have an agreement or an arrangement to pitch to him in person. Through adding players on the defense in free agency, the draft, and bringing Geno back, the Seahawks are in a very interesting situation because they're not far off from winning multiple playoff games. And how will they approach the next few months? I can't wait to find out. And that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it would mean the world and help a ton. Until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.